This is Kathryn Goetzke, host of the Hope Matrix podcast. We are here to share science, stories, and strategies for how to hope. I'm the Chief Hope Officer of the Shine Hope Company, and Shine is the mnemonic for how we teach hope. So when we talk about hope, we talk about how we use stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing networks, and eliminating challenges, which are our thinking patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. Hope is a skill. You can measure hope, you can teach hope, and you can start practicing skills to activate higher hope in your life today. And on this Hope Matrix podcast, we aim to bring in guests, experts in science, people with stories, and those that have strategies for activating hope in your life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hope Matrix podcast. This is your host, Kathryn Goetzke. I am grateful to be here talking with you all today and excited about our guest who got to me, I suppose, through another Travis, I believe, introduced us. So this is our first time meeting. I'm really grateful to meet you. Allison Norlian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So it was funny because I was talking to Travis about my desire to hike Kilimanjaro and do a documentary on hope in the process, and came to learn that you actually had done a documentary, I believe, wasn't it, on Kilimanjaro?
Yeah. So our documentary, we started in, and do you want me to get into it right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
So in so I'll sort of do a Spark Notes version of how I ended up doing the documentary, but I'm a former journalist. So I was, or I guess you're always a journalist, but I spent most of my career as a television reporter and anchor. And to make a long story short, my friend who I met as an intern in college, he and I both became reporters. We both wanted to tell impactful stories. And we found while we were working in the news industry, a lot of what we couldn't focus on sort of the stories we wanted to tell. And we wanted to dive deeper than we were able to in, a minute 30 they gave us every night. So we decided, fast forward in 2020, we started our own company. So we started Birdmine, which is my business, my production company. And the purpose of Birdmine, we created a production company with the goal of telling sort of unheard stories about underserved populations. And for me, even in my TV journalism career, disability was sort of always front and center, like trying to tell those types of stories because my older sister is profoundly disabled. And so I've always been an advocate for the disability community, always trying to spread awareness about our stories and the community stories, I should say, and the families' stories, and so that led us to start this company. And when we started Birdmine, we didn't know what our first documentary was going to be. We were like, okay, well, we made a website, we made, a social media, and we were like, let's just create let's create sort of a series that we can share online, whether it be on our website or social media, to give people an idea of what we want to be doing, like the kind of work, and just to see our work. And so hopefully that maybe eventually leads to something. So our first sort of initiative was to do a series highlighting people with disabilities in the fitness industry. And so because I am an advocate, I have a lot of friends in the disability community. And so I started reaching out to people saying like, hey, do you know anyone who is really involved in fitness and who's making an impact and a change? So I'm being introduced to all these various people, and I'm doing like pre-interviews with them to see if they are right for what we're trying to do with this series. So then I'm introduced through a friend to this woman, Erica Bogan, and I'm doing this pre-interview with her over Zoom, like we're talking now, but not podcast style. And I'm asking her questions, and she's telling me, she was paralyzed in a domestic violence incident when she was in her 20s. And when we met, she was in her late 30s, and had become a Spartan athlete and a CrossFit athlete. And so I'm like, oh, you'd be perfect for this series we're trying to do. So we're just like chatting it up and just, and I'm like, okay, like I'll reach out and we'll plan like an actual interview for what we hope to do with this. And then at the very end of this like pre-interview thing we did, she very casually mentions, "Oh, by the way, I'm climbing Mount Kilimanjaro."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "What do you mean you're climbing Mount Kilimanjaro?"
Uh,
And then she told me, she was doing it because she herself had struggled throughout her life with mental health and, had suicidal ideation. And she had a lot of friends with disabilities who died by suicide. And she really wanted to do it to spread awareness about that and just to honor their lives. And it's one thing that she was climbing the mountain. I mean, that obviously is incredible in itself. But the fact that she had such a purpose for that climb, and I just said to her, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go call my business partner because I don't wanna speak out of turn, but I really feel like this is our first documentary and, oh my god." So, I called Cody, my business partner, and I shared with him what, we talked about, and the next thing you know, we're starting our first documentary, which is Meandering Scars.
wow. And where Meandering Scars, where is it? Where can we watch it?
So we've just finished and we recently just started applying to festivals. So the way it works is you finish the movie and then you submit to film festivals in the hopes that you're going to get into those. And obviously our goal is eventually distribution. So we do hope to have that eventually so the wider public can see. So it unfortunately there's nowhere to see it now.
Right.
But I TBD, like hopefully soon I'll be able to give you some more insight into where it can be watched.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how can people follow just along in the journey while you
Sure. So
interview?
we have a website. It's meanderingscars.com. The
Okay.
website is a little bit unconventional. Cody and I actually we wrote poems that are representative of like the different acts of the film. And so those poems are like you'll see it's like you're moving through it's an interactive website where you're sort of moving through these poems and each one is, like I said, representative of a different act, a different scene. So it's sort of like almost like a sneak peek through words. um,
Yeah.
and there's photos and it's, there's videos and we're going to be adding to it. And eventually when we drop our trailer and our poster, we're going to, post it there. So meanderingscars.com is probably the best place. We're also on Instagram at, meandering scars. So, um, and I should mention that the documentary in itself, like it follows Erica Bogan, who's the woman I was talking about before. It follows her, before the climb. So I mean, we were filming her in her everyday life with her family and friends, with her daughters, going back to the accident site where she was paralyzed for the first time. Well, paralyzed, and this was the first time she went back and like sort of processed everything that happened to her in that moment. Um, and then we followed her up the mountain, obviously, and then we followed her after. So it's while the mountain is a very important part of the story, it's very much a documentary though about what it's like to be disabled in America and how inaccessibility, financial problems because of the way the system is set up, how so much of the sort of like the outside world leads to people with disabilities struggling with these mental health problems. It has nothing to do necessarily with with the disability itself. It's really the way society portrays disability and creates this sort of this feeling of burdensomeness that so many people with disabilities feel. Um, and so actually in our documentary, I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'm sorry.
No, you have great. Yeah,
Um,
fascinating. It's
I think
important.
in our documentary, we actually interview a woman. She's disabled herself, and she's the only woman in the country who researches at the intersection of suicide and disability. And so she's a voice throughout to kind of explain what Erica's experiencing and like why. Um, and she's fascinating and in her own right. She, like I said, is the only person doing this sort of research. Like you'll find people obviously researching disability, you'll find people researching suicide, but this like intersection is it's very rare to find anyone. She's one of the it from the last time we checked, she's the only person. Um and yeah, so it's I hope that people sort of watch the documentary with and get a better understanding of what it's like to be disabled in America. And yeah, and of course the climb is sort of like it's exciting, and you sort of see her, challenging herself with her team, and it's beautiful because we're on a mountain in Tanzania, and so the video is gorgeous, and
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah, that's amazing. So do you climb the mountain then too?
I don't.
Wow, amazing. Good for you.
I'll have to send you too. I used to write freelance for Healthy Women, which is a like an online publication. And after the climb, I wrote an article about, because like for me, I have anxiety. I have my own sort of stuff I deal with mentally. And so I wrote an article about like what it was like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with generalized anxiety disorder, because it's like I was doing this from my work, but I also was sort of struggling in the process in many ways because of my own sort of what I go through mentally. So, having to sort of contend with that during the process was difficult. But we got through it. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine. And that's the reality of, we have our jobs and then we also have our own experiences that we've got to navigate. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was 2015, I spoke at International Day of Persons with Disability at the UN, talking about mental health and how it relates to, why they're so intertwined, really, and why, in the disability community, like a lot of people don't even consider depression or anxiety a disability, and yet it's the leading cause of disability worldwide when you look at
and
the statistics around it.
yeah, no, you're so right. And I was just going to mention, the sad thing is that it's underfunded and not researched and not studied. And so much of that has to do with the way our society views disability. And that's why Lauren's research and like what she's doing, in my opinion, is so profound. It's like this person who's finally, recognizing sort of the importance of studying mental health and disability, and, ensuring that the disabled population has a voice in this realm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so I got into hope basically. I mean, I have my own suicide attempt in my 20s. I lost my dad to suicide, so I struggled a lot, and got to hope through basically looking at suicide prevention from at the time we were doing suicide prevention at time of crisis, so 800 numbers restricting access to means, and if you want to prevent suicide, you have to understand root cause. And across all of the studies, hopelessness came up as the single consistent predictor of suicide. And so my work has been about breaking down what is hopelessness. And when you look at hopelessness, it's both emotional despair. So you feel angry, afraid, sad, and it's motivational helplessness. So you feel powerless to do anything about it. And it's the combination of those two things that are lethal. And it's, when you look at hopelessness as both that, we all experience moments of hopelessness all the time. It's really how we manage them that matter. And so when you look at the disabled community, their moments of hopelessness are much greater. You think about all of the challenges they have. Of course, they're going to be frustrated, angry, and that helplessness, that powerlessness. And so to me, it's been about figuring out how we hope, how we learn how to hope, how we practice skills for hope, how we proactively manage those moments of hopelessness in healthy ways instead of unhealthy ways, which is what, it leads to violence, addiction, self-harm if we're not healthy and proactive about it. And that's really what then we were able to prove out that you could teach hope. And as you learn how to hope, anxiety and depressive symptoms went down. There's a scale for hope, so you can measure hope. And to me, I always say that those that have the more challenges you have, the more you have to practice the skills for hope, the more intentional you have to be about hope, because it's that persistent hopelessness that's what leads to anxiety and depression. So, yeah. it's been a journey understanding really all of it and then figuring out how to create a common language and framework around it, and then how we all start sharing strategies we're using, which I think brings me to your own journey and, your own journey with generalized anxiety disorder and really how you manage that. I mean, you look at the hike as a specific example, but getting more into, we use SHINE as the mnemonic for how we teach hope. So when you look at emotional despair, sadness, anger, fear, and we use our stress skills to kind of navigate those in healthier ways. So for you, what is what is is it fear that, I mean, a lot of anxiety seems to stem from fear. What is that? What is it for you?
Yeah, no, I think it's I mean, I have a lot of it's interesting. If you ask my mother, I've been anxious, since I was born. And I think a lot of it, unfortunately, like, and I don't know the exact science around this, but I've read before that, if your mother is anxious and stressed when she's pregnant, that very often lead to an anxious child. And so it really makes sense in my case because my older sister, like I said earlier, is profoundly disabled. And so at the time, I'm 35 years old, my sister's in her early 40s. When my mother gave birth, I mean, when she gave birth to a healthy baby, she had no idea that my sister had a disability until Becky started presenting challenges when she was around 1. And even to this day, there's no real name for what Becky has. It was like a genetic mutation, kind of just like a, random genetic, like I said, mutation. And but when my mother when she was told that she was pregnant with me, the doctors, instead of sort of making it an exciting moment of time, they were very much like, well, if she's a girl, it's a higher likely that she's going to be disabled too, and X, Y, and Z. And like, so the whole pregnancy, my mom has told me she was just stressed because she didn't know what was, going to come from my birth. And so, fast forward, she has me, and just, incredibly anxious since the time I was a kid. Um, and, it's interesting because I mean, I'm not gonna get too much into it, but, like, I definitely struggled a lot as a kid for so many reasons. Like, my parents were divorced, and, of course, like, my mother raising 2 little girls, one with profound developmental disabilities by herself was a challenge. And so, sort of living in that space and going through that, like, that being my upbringing, it caused a lot of stress. And of course there was so much love, and my mother is my hero, which is why, like, another film I have, my short film, is seriously about it's inspired by my mom and sister, and it's like a love letter to them because they are the reason that I have not only survived but thrived in my life. Like, I wouldn't be who I am without them, and I wouldn't take my upbringing, while going through it was sometimes challenging, I wouldn't change it for the world because I'm proud of who I am today, and I wouldn't be here without that. So, anyway, I say all that to say that, like, anxiety has definitely been something that has sort of plagued me my whole life. And, uh, it took, it took a long time for me to really find like something that worked fully, like all encompassing, um and I would say that the anxiety for most of my life, like my young life, it was not so horrible in the sense of, like, it wasn't causing me to, miss out on opportunities or miss out on school. It really wasn't until I was older and started my career that it really kind of became more challenging for me. Like, the anxiety got even worse when I was working in my first media job. I was a it was my first I was a production assistant at a radio station in Philly, and they were shift working me. So I was working like overnights, mornings, days, nights, and there was no consistent schedule, and it was causing me not to sleep, not to eat. Like, I just was all over the place, and that led me to sort of the first real intense panic attacks, anxiety that I experienced in my life. And kind of, that's why I went on medication because I was really struggling at that moment to just function. And it's funny because I sometimes still struggle with these things. Like I go to, and I'll talk about sort of what I do in my own life to ensure my mental health stays in check. And part of that is therapy. Um, but at the time, like I couldn't figure out what to do to be able to kind of get through my day because I was young. I was in my early 20s and I was trying to begin my career and I didn't want to be a nuisance and a burden and I didn't want to ask for, time off while I like wasn't sleeping because they were not giving me my circadian rhythm was all over the place and I wasn't working a consistent schedule. And when like I look back on that moment, I'm like, it's really messed up what they did to me. Like I should not have been working those types of, if, okay, you want to work overnights, well, you should be consistent overnights. You shouldn't have to be doing these, like, it's just terrible for your body. And especially for me and for like my mental health. And I continued struggling with this throughout my journalism career because I worked crazy hours. And so it was really just like kind of a constant battle. Especially like, when I eventually worked mornings full time, when I was like going to sleep at 6 p.m. and waking up at 1:30, 2 a.m. to get to the station to be on air by 5. And for some people it works for them. For me, it worked for a bit. Like I found a rhythm until it didn't work anymore. um and yeah, so it's anxiety for me really does sort of it is a lot of it's very fear-based. It's very like if I have, and I have often that's the so many like deadlines and um events and things that I'm doing, but like that will often be what leads me sometimes, not often, but sometimes to spiral in my own head.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, you think about it's just the physiology, like your stress hormones are so elevated. So unless you're really super proactive about how you manage them, and if you have any genetic predisposition to any of this, I mean, it's so important and that's why people that grow up in high chronic stress or, challenging environments, I mean, their stress hormones are so elevated so that it makes, I mean, that, leads to anxiety, depression, and unless we're really intentional about how we balance it out. And there's so much research on sleep and how sleep affects our mental health. And as you said, consistency is so important and can trigger, manic episodes if you don't sleep enough, for those that are predisposed to it. So yeah, I mean, you're still doing journalism. I mean, how do you manage your stress and your, like, can you feel it in your body when your stress hormones are
Oh
getting
yeah.
super, yeah. So what do you do?
Oh yeah. I mean, I talk about this in therapy all the time, and have you read the book, The Body Keeps the Score?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Of course, most people in this field have. But, like, really, it was so enlightening to me as somebody who's not in that field, but who really I'd never thought about it until reading that book, just, like, sort of the difference between how your body reacts to stress versus your mind, and it's like your body is its own mind, and
Yeah.
if you will,
Yeah.
it's really
It tells you.
fascinating. But for me, I mean, I do, and I'm gonna say that before I say this, it's not, this is not foolproof, right? Like there's moments that even I am doing everything possible to keep my stress low and to ensure my mental health is on the right track. And still sometimes, something happens and you struggle. So, but most of the time, this is really what gets me through. I mean, really for me, and it's going to sound so kind of cliche, but I have been on a journey to sort of like focusing on health as preventative versus, like waiting for something to arise and then get help for it.
Mhm.
So before Kilimanjaro, it's this sort of the journey started before Kilimanjaro because I knew I have anxiety and I knew I was going to be on a mountain in the middle of Tanzania where I did not have access to the things that I would necessarily have access to, when I'm home. So I wanted to make sure that I did everything possible to get myself both physically and mentally in the best state so I could at least say while I was on that mountain, if I was struggling, I did everything I could, like this, like I could look back and that could give me peace and comfort. So part of that was starting therapy. So therapy has been a really truly a godsend for me. I mean, I had a different therapist then. I have a new therapist that I've been with now since last October, And she is truly like, I don't even know, like, I don't even have the words to describe her. Like, she's an angel. Like, when you find a good therapist, it is everything. She really fully understands me in a way that I feel like I've never been. And of course, I have friends who understand me, and my mother is my best friend, but it's just different. And so therapy is huge for me. Of course, I mentioned earlier, I mean, I started taking medication when I was working at that news station, and I still take it. Like, all these years later, I'm still taking medication. I'm a big proponent. If it helps you, it helps me. So medication therapy, I'm very active when it comes to fitness and health. I'm also a part-time personal trainer for people with disabilities. So when I'm not filmmaking, I'm doing that. But that, like, for in my own personal life, movement is very important for me. Um, Also, like, I'm very much a little bit type A. But when I say that, like, for example, I like stability and ensuring I have a schedule. Like, I'm very schedule oriented. And so part of my schedule is every morning after I take care of my cat, I sit down and I read for several, I'll read, like, at minimum, depending on what I have going on that day, I read a chapter. Sometimes I'll read 2 to 3, depending. But that is very crucial for me because it's a moment of peace, and it's also something I really enjoy. And so I'm, like, starting my day doing something I enjoy, and it's something for me. So keeping that schedule is very important. And so, for example, like today, I knew I had this with you. So I woke up at 4 a.m. to, make sure that I read. And then once I read, I finish that. I went to the gym. I had my workout, and now I'm here with you. And so keeping my schedule is very important to me. Making sure I work out pretty much daily. I mean, I will take rest days if my body needs it. Like, I listen to my body. And if my body says, no more, I will listen to it. But even, like, on rest days, I'll often take a walk or do something, that's not strenuous. Like my typical workouts. So, and then I've been eating just completely healthy, and I focus on whole foods. And that's not to say that, like, I will not, eat a piece of chocolate once in a while, or, like, eat something that is outside of the whole foods um vein. But I really try to focus on my nutrition and eating healthy. And I drink I do drink wine, but, like, it's very minimally. Like, and because something I realized when I was younger, when I was drinking more, and of course, like, I wasn't, like, drinking a lot, but I was drinking more socially. um I noticed it started causing me to have anxiety, because I wasn't sleeping well often when I was drinking. So I mean, actually last year I pretty much cut drinking out altogether. And I feel like I'm sort of doing that now. Like, I'll randomly have a glass of wine here and there, but really it's just not. I prefer to do anything and everything I can to keep myself sort of mentally as happy and stable as possible. and yeah, so that's really what I do. It's like, it's exercise and movement daily. It's eating whole foods and, food that's going to fuel and make my body feel good. And it's ensuring my schedule, that I'm able to incorporate things I enjoy, like reading, into my schedule, and making sure that, I do it every day, because it just feels like I'm doing something for me versus, like, all the work that I'm doing. And honestly, I feel very lucky in my professions, because I really feel like I'm living out my joy. Like, filmmaking and what I'm doing with the movies I'm making, it's the happiest I've ever been professionally, ever. Um and I'm and working at Zoos Fitness, which is the gym for people with disabilities where I work, like, I feel like I'm living my purpose. And so I feel like finding what brings you joy, like what you were talking about earlier, it really is true that you can find work that fulfills you in that way. And I feel like I've found that. And even at zoos, like I've kind of carved out my own little area there where I created a blog for them and I'm writing articles for them. And so I'm not just personal training, I'm writing again, sort of in a journalistic way about our athletes, about our trainers, about, you know, accessibility and inclusivity in the fitness industry. So I really, oh, and the other thing I do is I volunteer, like I try to do things that really fill my cup up. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't know. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
talking a lot again.
No, you're not. I love it. It's great. I mean, you kind of covered stress skills and happiness habits in there. And happiness habits, we talk about the things that give us our dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin in the healthy ways, sleep, nutrition, exercise. Um, and reading, I think, is a great stress skill. Do you notice in your body when you start getting like, are you able to intercept it with an active practice? To stop, like, panic attacks and
I would say for me, it's very when I do start to notice, usually when I do start to notice, it's always at night for some godforsaken reason.
Mhm.
And I think it has to do with how that intense anxiety started, which is because I was struggling to sleep and all of the stuff I was dealing with working at that radio station.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, really, distraction is typically what I have to do in order, like, because, when you start to sort of spiral, you start to feel it in your body, you can feel it, and that leads to your mind. And so for me, it's like, I'll have to say, like, something that my husband, and he knows, like, and what we do whenever, if he senses that, like, I maybe am struggling in any way. I don't know if you've ever heard of the show Impractical Jokers.
No,
It's
I
like
haven't, yeah.
it's the only reality show that we watch, and it's these 4 middle-aged guys that, are best friends from high school, and they, like, put each other in silly situations and challenge each other, and it's so funny. It's like wholesome comedy, and it makes me so happy watching it. Um
Aw.
so, like, typically, if I do feel myself starting to struggle in some way, like, we watch that show. Like, it's a very therapeutic for me just to kind of turn off and watch something funny and it's not the type of, it's like I said, it's wholesome comedy. Like, it's not, uh I don't love comedy that, like, picks on other people, and it's not like that.
Right.
So that, of course, breathing, and stretching, like, I've really become sort of obsessed because I am working out daily. I've become sort of obsessive about stretching. So sometimes, like, if I am starting to feel my body overwhelmed in my body, stretching and breathing, like,
Mhm.
doing something like that.
Yeah.
Um, those are sort of, I think, my go-tos. There are, like, I've had therapists and people talk to me about, like, these sort of, like, some mental things you can do, and I've still kind of struggled to do that because I find if I'm not, like, physically taking myself out of whatever is starting to begin,
Yeah.
I can't get myself out of my head. So,
Yeah.
I have to do something physically to
Right.
change the reality of, of what's going on in my head, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, yeah, I would say maybe not. I mean, to me, that's an intervention, not a distraction. Like,
Mm.
distraction, so I think it's so critical. I mean, and it's doing something healthy, that helps you kind of mitigate the activation of that stress response. And breathing is the most if you can get yourself belly breathing and calm down your autonomic nervous system. I mean, that I used to get panic attacks all the going into speaking, and it was just I'd stop breathing, I'd notice, and then I'd that fear response. And if you're in your fear response, you stop breathing, and when you stop breathing, your body reacts to that because it thinks you're in danger, and that further activates your stress response, and before you know it, you're in that full-blown panic attack. When if you do breathing as an intervention and feel yourself grounded and your feet on the ground and breathe into your stomach to just control that autonomic nervous response, it's so effective, really.
So
So
wild.
I
Okay,
know.
buddy. what we do to ourselves.
I know. It's like, oh my gosh, I just need to breathe. And my friend has a company, Leaf Therapeutics, and it's an HRV. It measures your heart rate variability, and when our stress response is triggered, our heart rate variability drops, and we want a high HRV, and it'll start vibrating. And we often don't realize how much we're triggered by things, and so it vibrates quietly. And the intervention is a 3-minute breathing exercise.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's very cool, and it increases your HRV. Like, you can see it with your breathing, you increase your HRV, and then you're
Wow.
okay again. So it's really, yeah, just learning skills around doing that. And to me, I was so old, but when I knew these things, and that's why, we teach a lot of programming for youth and
Yeah,
whatnot.
especially nowadays.
I know. Oh, I know. Yeah, absolutely. And so the I is inspired actions, and it's really getting out of helplessness into action. When when did you do that? When you were realizing what did you have to do? Like, what were the steps you had to take?
What,
Um,
to get to where I am now?
yeah, yeah, and to get support and help, and to realize that you needed support from someone, that it was becoming a challenge for you.
Right. I mean, when I look at this, I look at it's been a journey, right? Like, so it started when I worked at that radio station, but I don't think I only recently have gotten to where I am right now, where I feel like the best that I've ever felt. Um, and it's like I've picked up pieces along the way to get to this point, if that makes sense. I think that first struggle with the rate at the radio station, that led me to medication. Um, I had been interested in fitness and health around that time, and I was involved in like working out daily and eating healthy, but it only recently did I sort of readapt that mindset. Because life, I got married, then the pandemic happened, and the pandemic really threw me off. Like, it I up until the pandemic had felt very like physically and healthy, and then the pandemic happened and we were living, we were indoors for forever, and I gained a bunch of weight, and was not taking care of myself in the right way, and noticing that um it was definitely leading me to have, some more mental health problems, like struggling with anxiety. So then finally I was able to, but it took me a long time to like, I feel like I've kind of accepted that life is a journey and that it's never going to be foolproof, and you're never going to like you said earlier, you have to every single day, you have to focus on the joy, focus on what you want, who you want to be in life. And so it's not like I've like adopted these principles and been doing it, perfectly for the past however many years.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, like it started with medication. Kilimanjaro is what led me to therapy. That's when I started therapy. And I actually, after Kilimanjaro, I stopped going to therapy for a brief moment before last October. And I don't want to get too much into this, but I'm Jewish, and when October 7th happened, and my father's from Israel, so like half my family's there. So that rocked my world. And when that happened, I knew I needed therapy again. So I've been in therapy since then. So it's like moments lead you to sort of, I think, find your balance, and these are all the moments that have led me to this space that I'm in today. Where I do feel the best sort of physically and mentally that I've felt in a very long time.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it takes work. It takes intentional work. It takes steps. And I think, you pointed out so well, we get off track a bit and things happen and we have challenges, and we have to take steps to get back to where we want to be. And it's a process. And it's up to us to take those steps. I've been in recovery 20 years, and like no one could have done that other than myself. It's actions and setting those goals and overcoming the obstacles to the goals. That's really what we know about hope. And it sounds, the end is networks, nourishing networks, and it sounds like you have pretty strong networks that support you. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I am so grateful for the people in my life. I feel I'm such a proponent of constantly, and I might be kind of annoying to some people who I love, because I'm always telling them I love them.
Aw.
And,
Yeah.
but it's actually, and I'll just mention, like, one of the first moments I knew that my husband, like, I knew I wanted to be with my husband forever, was we I was working at my third TV station in Richmond, Virginia. I was working crazy hours, the morning shift. And suddenly, after doing that shift for like about a year or so, I started really struggling mentally with it. And to make a long story short, I ended up having to take a week off of work because I was struggling so much mentally. And like, it was leading me not to sleep and not to eat and all these things that I kind of went through previously. And I had just started dating my now husband, maybe like 5, 6 months prior to that. And I'll just never forget, like, being kind of terrified to talk to him about what I was going through, because, I mean, we hadn't been together that long, and some people are very, I mean, you know how it is. Not everyone is so receptive to mental health and talking about it. And so I was terrified, but I am always like one to lead with honesty. And I told him exactly what I was going through. And instead of, running away, he brought over a bottle of wine and then let me, like, I sat in the tub and he just read to me to try to, like, distract me. Um, and I was like, "Okay, that's it." I mean, there's so many other reasons that, he's
Yeah.
the one, but, like,
Yeah.
it was just so refreshing to, like, to know that, you could and rely on him. And I mean, even to this day, the way I can rely on him when I am experiencing these things. And of course, then, my family, his family, like, are also so wonderful. And we come from great families, thankfully, and lots of friends who, support me and I can support them. And then, of course, my wonderful therapist. So it's definitely a village. Like, I really understand why humans, it's like you need a village. It's like, that quote, a village, like, I forget the exact quote, but about, like, raising children, it takes a village or something.
Yeah.
It's so true. And it really takes a village to thrive, I think,
Yeah.
in this world.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's human beings are we, isolation and lonely. Like, you need good people to support you, and for you to be, a good person to support others. And
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's so important. And, people talk about how lonely they are. And it takes intention and action to actually create connections. And anyone can create connections with action. Going to, you know, churches or places of worship in the community, or to community groups or community centers, or to the gym, or joining. I mean, I think technology has made it very easy for us to find connections
yeah,
in different ways. I mean, I think Bumble is an app for dating, but it's also, you can meet friends, and yeah. So for those that are having challenges with connections, I mean, connections are so important. And it's important that we're kind of innovative and intentional and proactive. I mean, some people don't have healthy, good, strong families, but then it's about kind of coming up with new ways to create that. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
creating that family.
Exactly.
I'm Oh, and I just want to add really quick, like, moving to Los Angeles. And so I'm also a crazy cat lady. I love cats. I love animals, but I had two cats for a really long time. I got them when I was in my early 20s. And I'm only bringing this up because last year one of my babies passed away, and it was like one of the worst nights, months, whatever of my life. But I say all this to say that it led me to want to honor her. So I started volunteering at a cat rescue. And, it's like doing that, I made some of my now greatest friends that I've made here in LA, because we're like-minded people and we love animals. And so yeah, it's sort of, you have to seek out connection. And I mean, I'm grateful that I started working at this volunteering at this shelter, and now I have friends from it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the only reason I bring that up.
Yeah, I love it. It's amazing. Yeah, and taking tragedy, things that are painful, and finding something a way to kind of channel that energy, as opposed to just sitting home mourning over the loss I mean, you have to do both. It's
Yeah,
important to do both. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, the last one is the E, the eliminating challenges, which are the negative thought patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. So, worrying about things that's a big part of anxiety, I think, is like we get panicked about things is that for you? Trying to control things outside of our control leads to hopelessness, internalizing failure, negative bias, attaching to outcomes can be a challenge. But those are all things that our mind kind of does. Automatic negative thoughts is very normal and we've got to learn how to, meditation taught me how that I didn't have to react to every thought I have. I mean, um, and how to be more intentional about what I did to like allow for that space between that response and then my actual action.
Sure.
But what have been the challenges for you? Like, what does your mind do that trumps you?
Uh, I mean, I do think that this is something that I don't know if I hate to say that I'll always struggle with this, but I mean, it's when you have anxiety, like it's definitely, I mean, my anxiety definitely stems from when my mind decides to think too much, for whatever's happening, whatever's coming up, my mind thinks too much about that. And creates this sort of, I don't know, this vicious cycle pattern, that I struggle to get out of. But it goes back to sort of what I was talking about before, where distraction is like the main, or intervention, as you said, getting myself, if it's early enough, like going for a walk or doing something like physically moving usually helps me sort of alter my thought process, doing something that will sort of shift that narrative I'm telling myself. But also, I really have become good at I'm a very introspective person, so I'm like very aware when my mind starts to when my mind starts to go down that sort of to that dark place. And it's really interesting being introspective, because you can really, it's like you're sort of watching yourself.
I
and
know, yeah.
and you're like still struggling, but you're like, I can see you, like, I'm
Totally.
so I really, but like I have become pretty good at like reframing my thoughts. Um, and I'll give you like an example that happened this year. So I live in California. And so like the beginning of this year, we dealt with the fires. So that was like the beginning. And thankfully, I did not ever have to evacuate, but we were close to having to evacuate. We were like it started to creep in, and we were going to be in a zone. So that, of course, led me to stress, especially I'm not from California. So like whenever anything happens here, it's sort of environmentally, it's new because I'm from the East Coast originally. So the fires were really stressful to deal with. And then 2 weeks later, I was driving to work at zoos, and I had a green light, and I was T-boned by an 84-year-old woman who ran a red light. And I'm fine. I mean, I'm okay. Like of course it was extremely stressful. I had to get a staple in my head, whole thing. But I have to tell you that like, it's like one of those things when it rains, it pours, and things keep happening. And like unfortunately, where my mind starts to go is like, what did I do? Like, why is this happening to me? And of course, but like I feel like it's just sort of this like natural. I don't know if it's natural, if it's just me, but it's the reaction that I know that like when it happens, when I start to think that way, I can now very quickly say, like, reframe my thoughts and like, Allison, you know how many people were affected by the fires? Like, you were fine, and you survived that crash and your car didn't, but that your car saved you. So, like, so it's like I really feel like I've become sort of I don't know what the right word is, but like I've a champion of reframing my thoughts. Like but it's taken a long time, it's consistent work. And I think everything I've talked about today and is like the main point though, is that it's consistent work, right? Like you have to choose to be in this mindset. You have to choose to do the things, whether it be go work out or read in the morning or whatever it may be. You have to choose every single day to do those things, because it's so easy to sort of revert back to complacency.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You do have to choose, and you have to be self-compassionate when you veer a little off track, and you have to know that you can get back. And it's like intentional every day. It's a commitment to it. It's a commitment to self so that we can be the best we can be for other people. It's
Yeah.
self-forgiveness when we're not in
Oh
that
yeah.
direction, and yeah. And then it's again getting back on track. So
Yep.
that's amazing. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share about your own story? Then I have to ask you selfishly for advice on Kilimanjaro training.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. No, I mean, I guess the only thing we really didn't touch upon is my short film, which is another that I created, and that I wrote and co-directed, and it was it like it's screened internationally, and it's was the latest screening we did was at the Austin Film Festival. That was last year, and it's inspired by my mom and sister. And it's a story about a mom fighting to have a bat mitzvah, which is a coming of age ceremony in Judaism, for her profoundly disabled daughter in a synagogue that refuses to break from tradition. And my sister was the first person with disabilities and my sister, I should mention, is nonverbal, developmentally disabled, to have a bat mitzvah at our synagogue growing up. And so it's a love letter to my mom and sister. And yeah, it's very special to me. And actually next week I'm traveling to Florida because I'm a guest speaker at the Jewish Federation of it's the Jewish Women's Foundation Granting Wishes luncheon. And it's like through the Federation of Boca, and I'm their guest speaker, and we're showing the movie again. So it's really like the little script, the little movie that could, because it's been really like making the rounds of the festivals, and the support we've gotten for it has been amazing. And we just were accepted into a co-op, an educational distribution co-op, so people will be able to buy the movie and, for in perpetuity, or buy it for like, lease it for basically, not lease it, license it for 14 days, and screen it. So we'll hopefully be working with various educational, religious institutions. But yeah, so that's my other film that I'm very proud of.
Oh, that is amazing. And what was non-traditional about it? What did you have to get?
So it's the fact that when you have a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah, you are studying Hebrew, the Torah, for a year, and then you have to go up in front of a congregation of people and recite all of that you studied. And someone like my sister can't do that. She is nonverbal, and she is developmentally disabled. And so it's like my sister's bat mitzvah was, of course, it was a modified version where over the years, my mother, my father, my grandfather, they taught her a bunch of Hebrew songs. And like my sister's way of communicating, she's vocal, so she can like hum and say make sounds that that will sound like the song. And so basically her bat mitzvah was my mom and sister went up on the bima, which is the stage, and they sang these songs together that my sister had learned over the years. A lot of them are like, just songs that you would hear at Saturday congregate, services. And so that was her version of a bat mitzvah. And so it was modified. And so yeah, so it's this was in the 90s. So it was back when things are very different now. Bar and bat mitzvahs happen for disabled people all the time. You'll find actual, like, there are divisions of, in synagogues specifically for people with disabilities and making sure that they're included and all of this stuff. But this was back in the 90s when it was not just in synagogues. Every institution was sort of forgetting about our disabled population. So yeah, so I wrote a story and we made a movie.
Yeah. What's the name of the movie?
It's called 13.
13. And
Yeah.
can people see it somewhere, or can they?
So our website for New Day, which is where our educational distribution, will be up soon. And so once it's up, I'll definitely send it to you and people will be able to, yeah, to license, to buy it. And but you can follow along. Like, we have 13 short film on Instagram, and yeah, I think we're just on Instagram for that. So
Awesome. Amazing. That is so cool. Yeah, I can't wait to check it out. Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah. Any advice for me for climbing Kilimanjaro? How was it? How was it?
So I would say it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I mean, physically, emotionally, mentally, it was very hard. But I'm so glad but the thing is, I was also filming on the mountain, right? Like, so I was working. So that made it a little bit more challenging. Um, the thing that I think you really have to realize is, like, it's important to get into shape. It's important to uh, train with, like, with a mask because of the altitude. But even with that said, once you're on that mountain, you're only going to get so much in America because we don't have the same altitude fluctuations that they do in Africa. So it's like, even though I trained with a mask, it was still such a struggle, to be on that mountain. Um, but because I trained so hard for 2 years, I feel like I was okay pretty much the majority of the time. I mean, I was in pain, but I was okay. The thing also about Kilimanjaro is you can be healthy and still the altitude can affect you. Like, you don't really know how the altitude's going to affect you until you're there. So, for example, there was a 60-something-year-old woman on our trip and she was fine, made it to the top. But two people who were one was in her 30s, one was in her 40s, did not make it. I mean, they made it, like, they're alive.
Right.
Sounded horrible. But they did not make it to the top. They had to turn around. So, because of the altitude. So it's like, you just have to prepare yourself that it's so interesting that you can be so healthy, but still, like, once you're on the mountain, you just don't know how your body is going to react to that change. Um, it was such a rewarding experience, though. Like, I'm so happy that I did it.
Yeah.
But it is funny because when I came back, I think everyone expected me to have some, like, existential, like, realization or something. And I remember people asking me, like, "Oh, so what's next? Like, what are you gonna do?" And I'm like, "Never do that again." Never again. So, yeah,
Yes, it's hilarious.
so not to scare you. You should
Oh,
actually
yeah.
do it once.
Yeah,
Um,
that's funny.
but I have no desire to, like, do Everest
Yeah.
or base camp or yeah, I'll stick to hiking
Yeah.
smaller mountains.
Right, right. Oh, that's awesome.
But I am happy
Amazing.
to also talk, like, offline and give you more tips if you want, and
Oh, thank
yeah, of
you. Thank you
course.
so much. I appreciate that. Well, Allison, it's been amazing talking to you. You're so inspiring. I love all that you're doing. And I think having your media background and talking about the disability community is so important. I mean, talking about it in the right way, getting the word out, ensuring all know what the challenges are and what the solutions are as well is super important. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Really
Thank you for
insightful.
having me. This was so lovely.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to all the listeners. Please feel free to share this with others that may be so inspired. We need to get the word out about this important work and also, yeah, how we navigate life's challenges and what it takes to actually get to hope. It's an active process, as we've talked about. And so, yes, have a wonderful day. Again, thank you for listening in, and remember to keep shining hope.
So, thank you all for listening in to the Hope Matrix podcast. We want to shine a light that hope is teachable, hope is measurable and teachable, and provide you with actionable insights for how you can start activating hope in your life today, and provide a framework so you can start talking about hope with other people and practice these skills together, because we are better with hope. Please feel free to check out theshinehopecompany.com, where we list all of our resources around how to hope. We have a lot of free programs for how to hope, including the 5-day challenge, our hope infographic with a lot of skills that showcase how to hope, and articles of how to incorporate hope into your life. We have the Hope Beat Weekly, which is a weekly newsletter that shares strategies for hope. We have a My Hope Story template, so you can write your own hope story today. Also, My Hope Heroes, so we can share what our heroes are doing to activate hope in their lives. And this is especially good with youth, so they can start looking up to people that have overcome similar challenges to them and seeing how these heroes use the Shine Hope framework. We have a Hopeful Minds for Teens program, a Hopeful Minds overview, educator guides. We have a new evidence-based college course, so you can activate hope on the college campus. There are programs in the workplace, overview courses, 90-minute courses for learning the what, why, and how to hope. What I want you to know about hope is it's a skill. You've got to practice these skills to become hopeful. It's easy to fall into despair and helplessness when we deal with challenges in life, and it takes intentional work and practice to get to hope. And yet it is always possible. So no matter what life brings, keep shining hope. Thanks so much for listening in. Have an awesome day. And of course, I've got to add that this program is designed to assist you in learning about hope. It should not be used for medical advice, counseling, or other health-related services. I, Fred, the Shine Hope Company, and myself, Kathryn Goetzke, do not endorse or provide any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am not a medical doctor. The information provided here should not be used for the diagnosis or treatment of any medical condition, and cannot be substituted for the advice of physicians, licensed professionals, or therapists who are familiar with your specific situation. Consult a licensed medical profession or call 911 if you are in need of immediate assistance. And be sure to know the crisis hotline, 988, if you are in need of support. Thanks a bunch for listening. Take good care of yourself and keep shining hope.